I believe that this current situation is traumatizing for everybody. Now, maybe, and so I guess I should probably say I believe the current situation is traumatizing for me, and because of the way I think about trauma, it's not a horrifying thing, because I think trauma is not these horrible things that should never happen. I think trauma is just like COVID-19, something that's possible. And so COVID-19 plus the vaccine debacle and the political stuff around it and the situation that I'm in right now, where my life is very limited and I can't do some of the things that I love to do. So that is a possible thing. That is a thing that sucks a lot, but is absolutely possible and can happen. And so that possible idea, what it does is it opens up this notion for me of what's possible in the world. This is what a thing that's possible in the world. This is the way that the world is. And so in the world that I've been sheltered from, I'm now available and aware of the way things can be, because this kind of stuff happens in other parts of the world all the time, where you have children dying every day of dysentery because they can't access clean water. That's a daily fact of life for people. Where we have people in this country, because of the color of their skin, who think about safety in a completely different way than I do. Where we have women who can't walk out into a parking lot without having to think about needing to protect themselves. So these are all things that weren't a part of my reality, but I mention them because they're things I'm now aware of. And so thinking about them in the context of other people is one thing, but then when it happens to me, and I'm not equating this situation for me to any of those things by any means. However, this situation has definitely illuminated my world in the context of what's possible in life. And so then it becomes a beginning, because one of the things that I talk about all the time, and one of these big things in narrative therapy, is that everyone responds to trauma. Trauma is something that everyone responds to. It's a transition from the idea that everyone can be traumatized, which is also true. However, it's way more important, at least as far as I'm concerned, to think about the notion that everyone responds to trauma, because then I go, oh, so what is that response? And then all of a sudden I'm in a completely different territory. So it's no longer about the horrifying things that happen to people. Also important, also a part of reality. However, when we take up this notion of response, then we're invited into a different territory that we're rarely invited into in our culture. And so then this experience, my experience of being traumatized by the COVID situation, the past 4 years, past multiple years, what's brought us to this place right now in the context of the reality of my life, is an opportunity for me to go, what does it say about what I stand for that I'm responding to this situation in this way? I had a really cool conversation last night with a whole bunch of really amazing people about the struggles that I'm having and how this situation is hard for me. And using that word hard brought up a conversation about what I meant by that word. And I realized in that conversation, I didn't really know. And so in illuminating that idea, just talking about the idea that this is hard for me and trying to understand what I meant by the word hard, I then got to this thing for me that's very true, that is about how one of the primary things I'm missing is my connection to other people, my physical interactions with other people. And then, so now I'm thinking about that, physical interactions with other people. And then what does that say about what I stand for, what matters to me, that's a huge thing for me to have lost. Now, it's really important, at least for me, I think right now, to say that this is not to suggest that I'm the only person in the world who's missing those things. What I am saying very strongly is that it's really important for me to take that as something that's, that my specific response, my specific experience of that loss is unique for me, that it's not the same as everybody else. And the reason why I think that's so important is because it's really easy to go, oh yeah, we all miss that. Yeah, that sucks. And then that conversation is over. That's what we in narrative therapy call a thin description, that we're on the same boat, everything sucks for us. Because then we're done with the conversation and I don't really still have any idea what it means for me. So if it's a shared experience, then how come I don't know what it means? Because I actually haven't asked those questions. And so what I do by taking it away from this, we're all in the same boat, we're all experiencing the same thing, is I get to find out uniquely from each and every person that I talk to what it is about that, what it is for them that's hard, and what that says about what matters to them, what they stand for. And then we get this whole book, 7 Billion Geniuses, that I wrote, is about this idea that ultimately that uniqueness, that unique response is really, really important. And so now, as you can tell, just from the Genesis conversation, we started off talking about trauma. Now, what are we talking about? Are we talking about trauma? Are we talking about suffering? Are we talking about bad, scary, sad things? No. talking about the idea of response, and embedded in that response is what's emblematic for people about what matters to them, what they stand for. And the conversation becomes that. And it's not to ignore what happened or the reality of the situation that we're in, because it's wild because this question comes up a lot. Isn't that just kind of denying no, it's not denying what's going on at all. It's simply talking about something that we don't talk about in this culture, which is that everybody responds to trauma, and that those responses are emblematic of what people stand for and what matters to them. So then we can all ask, and the thing, that conversation I had last night started with an interview that I was doing of myself, where I started to talk about the difficulty of the situation, how hard the situation is for me. And then I realized, having said hard, that I actually didn't know what I meant by that word. That required nobody but me. It was great to have all these other people around it, and they asked me all kinds of amazing questions. However, that kind of questioning is something that anybody can do all by themselves. What do I mean by hard? And then go to that. And then so that is a richer description of my response, is to really understand what I mean by hard, or to ask questions into that territory of what I mean by hard. I avoided the idea of understand. I think understand is a difficult concept, not a really useful concept, because it suggests there's an endpoint where I completely understand. I don't think that is ever possible, to completely understand anything, which might sound like a drag. However, it's also possible that it's just an amazing thing. Like, there's always possibilities for a richer description, instead of you get to this understand point and everything's done. Also a countercultural idea, moving away from this finality, these endpoints, these are goals we need to achieve, and rather saying every description just creates possibility for a richer description. So there's always possibilities for more description and richer description. That seems pretty cool to me. So so this idea, so we start with the notion that this situation is traumatizing for me, and it's a hard situation for me, which invites me into a position to go, oh, so what do I mean by hard? And then to expand from there onto this rich description of what is for me a response to this situation, this traumatizing situation, which then creates a whole other possibility for me in how I can be in this place of trauma, which is attending to not only the difficult parts, and I don't even know what I mean by difficult, which is a conversation I could have with myself, but also to start to illuminate what's made manifest by my response, what it says about what I'm standing for, what matters to me, what I hold dear. Those are great things for me. Those are great things for me to know about. I can post, and I might even do that, post those things around my environment. So when I'm experiencing the hard part, I'm also experiencing my knowledge now that hard part is a manifestation of something that's important to me and something that matters to me. And that might seem like, oh, well, of course it is. However, that unique experience that each and every one of us have in this response is something that I'm really advocating for each and every one of us to illuminate. And if you want to send me direct messages, my Facebook page, or comment on this video on YouTube, ask me how to ask these questions, I'm happy to let you know. And actually, emailing me is probably easier. jgwixson@aol.com is my email address. And that is a great way to get in touch with me. If you want to ask me how to ask yourself those questions, or the questions that I ask myself, I'm happy to let you know. But that's it for that. What's next for Dr. Joel today? I'll be back tomorrow with something.